Next on AM 1480 WLEA, The Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
And here's Dr. Gary Ostrower, longtime Alfred University history professor. Dr. Ostrower, thanks for coming in.
Well, thanks for inviting me to be here.
How many years you been on the Newsmaker Show? Since what, 1971, 72?
No, not quite that long. I would say 1986 or 1987. I'm not exactly sure when I did my first show. But it's about, 30 years, 32 years at this point.
And I think it was called Sound Off in those days.
I don't remember that.
Yeah, they used to take calls, and he used to do a show called Sound Off.
Well, we did take calls. I remember doing a program about the Dust Bowl back during the 1930s, and there were some people who called in who had come to this area from the Midwest and had actually experienced the Dust Bowl on their own. I mean, it was really kind of nice having a sort of a first-person account of those historical experiences.
Yes. That would have been very interesting. Now, you grew up, you were in downstate for the Depression era, correct?
Well, I grew up in New Jersey. I grew up in central New Jersey, but in 1957, now I was born in 1939, so you folks can do your math on that.
Okay, tail end, yeah.
But in 1957, I was 17 years old. I came to Alfred University, and then I graduated 4 years later, of course, and then headed out. I was in Washington, D.C. for a few years, and I taught at Vassar College, which is down in Poughkeepsie. And then eventually came back. Then I went back to Washington, and eventually came back to Alfred University. I assumed, all right, I'll be at Alfred for maybe 4 or 5 years, and then probably move on. And
but it turned into not being a stepping stone.
Yeah, well, you all know the movie The Man Who Came to Dinner. I was the professor who came to dinner. I've been here ever since, 50 years.
Dr. Ostrower. Candidates taking things of value from foreign governments, Iran tensions, New Deal origins of the programs like Sanders and Warren. Those are some of the topics that we're going to be covering today. Yeah,
I was going to start with a comment about taking things of value from foreign countries, and I mention that because President Trump just this past weekend did an interview with George Stephanopoulos. I think it was not this past weekend, but last week, with George Stephanopoulos, in which he was asked about taking aid from foreign countries, and he said, "Of course I would take it." He says, "Why not take it? If you have something that might, reflect on your opposition, of course you're going to take it." Well, there is a federal law which says you shall not take it. It is illegal to take anything of value, and that includes this kind of information from foreign governments. And what I found kind of interesting about that is not only was Trump kind of inviting, the sort of information that he had invited back during 2016 when he said that, if you Russians, if you have information about the 30,000 emails that Hillary Clinton had apparently discarded, we want to hear about this sort of thing. But, going all the way back to something called the Logan Act of 1799, it is illegal to consort with foreign governments in respect to American elections. It really undermines another way of undermining our free electoral system. And what I found kind of ironic was that here you have a man, Trump, who for months and months and months and months, really 2 years now, have said no collusion, there's been no collusion, and now he is welcoming collusion. So, he's difficult to predict. People, I think, there are many of his own supporters, many people in his base, find this kind of refreshing that he's, breaking the rules. But the fact of the matter is that it is illegal. Just as it is illegal for him to withhold information about his income tax when congressional committees request it, because there is a law called the Tax Law of 1924, which is very, very clear. The congressional committees have a right for, to get this sort of information. Well, we talk about the rule of law, and the president, I think, has flouted the rule of law in a number of different ways. And, of course, we could also talk about obstruction of justice in numerous ways over the past 20 24 months or 26 months or so, where I think the president has obstructed justice. But, you've heard me on this before. I don't think we have to, overdo it. But I think that, we have a president who in many ways is a threat to the system of justice that we have taken for granted over the last 230 years of American history.
Senator Bernie Sanders and Senator Elizabeth Warren, do you consider them, how would I say it, ideological descendants of FDR and the New Deal?
Yeah, well, yes and no. I'd make a distinction between Sanders and Warren, although it's not a huge distinction. Sanders calls himself a democratic socialist. Well, unfortunately, we don't all agree on what a democratic socialist is. From my perspective, a democratic socialist is a socialist, if you will, that really kind of reflects the Scandinavian tradition. When I say the Scandinavian tradition, I mean the kind of socialism that has existed in places like, Norway and Sweden and certainly Denmark. I know a little bit about Denmark because I had lived there for a while. Elizabeth Warren completely denies that she is a socialist, and I think for good reason, and that's that she's not a socialist. But then, what do we really mean? Okay, in the American context, not the Scandinavian context. What are we talking about when we deal with democratic socialism? And Bernie Sanders just very recently tried to outline exactly what that does mean. And what he said basically was that he supports an affordable health care system. He supports the right of Americans to a good job, and not only to a good job, but to a living wage. He argues that we have to have a $15 an hour minimum wage. He argues that Americans, again, have a right, not merely the opportunity for, but have a right to affordable housing, that they have a right to a secure retirement. And of course, he argues the right to a clean environment. Well, from my perspective, this is not socialism. This is New Deal liberalism. This really comes out of the FDR framework. Now remember, the New Deal, which occurred during the 1930s, during the greatest depression in American history, the New Deal saved American capitalism. It did not undermine capitalism, it saved capitalism. Had FDR not offered his New Deal, the United States might have veered into a genuinely socialist direction or a genuinely fascist direction. That did not happen. And so, it seems to me that what Bernie Sanders is calling democratic socialism, as I said a moment ago, is really New Deal liberalism. Is that very different from what Elizabeth Warren is proposing? And I think the answer is no, it's not very different at all. So we could argue about semantics, we could argue about the language that we use, but the fact of the matter is that what we're seeing is a kind of revival of what FDR had proposed way back during the 1930s. And I might add one more thing about the FDR thing. I said that, FDR really saved American capitalism. FDR he promoted programs that led to, what we're going to call the New Deal liberalism, New Deal coalition that existed for about 30 years or so, right through the Lyndon Johnson administration. And it provided the basis for the prosperity that almost all of us enjoy today. And so it's ironic that people who are the beneficiaries of this kind of liberalism, the beneficiaries of these kinds of New Deal programs, are now becoming increasingly opposed to governmental support for such things as, a $15 minimum wage.
On the topic of Iran, 3 hours ago, BBC reported U.S. sends more troops amid tanker tension with Iran. From Politico 3 hours ago. Trump prepares to bypass Congress to take on Iran. That's a big one.
Well, you're not kidding. It's a big one. We don't know where this is going to end up. It could very well end up in a war. And if it does become a war, it's going to be a war much more similar, let's say, to what happened in Iraq. Than what happened in Serbia in the year 2010. Iran is a big country. Iran is a powerful country. Iran is they can, as we're discovering right now, seek to develop nuclear weapons. We might be able to prevent them from doing that in a wartime situation. But let's not assume that a war is going to be an easy war to win. If we do wind up in a war with Iran, it's probably going to be a conflict that lasts at least 5-10 years, maybe conceivably longer, because of issues having to do with guerrilla warfare and so forth. I think it's a very dangerous thing, and it's dangerous in part because often, even when countries don't want to go to war, they wind up going into war because of miscalculations, because of mistakes, because of errors, because they really haven't thought through exactly what their policy is. And let me, again, if I may, I don't think that Trump wants a war with Iran. I do believe that his national security advisor, John Bolton, would very well welcome a war with Iran. So you have right at the pinnacle, right at the very, very top of the American government, kind of a conflict there. And for that reason, I think it's kind of difficult to say exactly what American policy is right now and what American policy will become within 1 week or 2 weeks or a month from now. President Trump, about 2 weeks ago, ordered an additional 1,500 troops into the Middle East. Yesterday, or really this morning, is what the announcement was made. We hear that another 1,000 troops are going into the Middle East. On one level, we're doing that to intimidate Iran from aggressive action. And on the other level, it's the kind of thing that will play into the hands of the hardliners in Iran. And for that reason, they may meet. They may take us on. So I'm just not, I don't think that any of us knows what's really going to happen. But I think that all of us can admit that it's a very, very sensitive and a very, very dangerous game that these two countries are playing right now.
We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with Dr. Ostrower. When we get back, we'll continue our discussion, and we'll get in a little This Day in History, some interesting stuff from World War II on this day in history, and we'll get to that. Stay with us.
The Ryan Agencies, your local, independent insurance agencies. Online insurance companies don't know the unique needs of our rural community. The Ryan Agency meets rural needs every day. Local insurance experts offering realistic solutions. Contact the Ryan Agencies today. Good local people offering realistic insurance solutions.
Insurance protection you can rely on. The Ryan Agency.
Checking in now with meteorologist Rob Carroll. Rob, what's up for today?
Well, unfortunately, Brian, lots and lots of rain. It looks a bit on the soggy side across the southern tier the next couple of days. We've got a stalled frontal boundary that is going to continue to be quite active, which is unusual for June. We're tracking a series of low-pressure systems moving along the front, and that will keep the weather on the unsettled side. First batch brought us some rain this morning. That'll head off into the eastern part of the state later this morning. And then we've got another wave of low pressure that'll come up at us tonight and into tomorrow, and yet another one for Thursday into early Friday. So keep the umbrella handy. You're going to need it. Lots of showers headed our way. Temperatures today near 75, though they diminish through the afternoon. Tonight, a few showers, maybe a sprinkle or two, 55 to 60. Clouds, some showers tomorrow. Chance of a thunderstorm as well. Warm and humid, 75 to 80. Showers, thunderstorms tomorrow night, 55 to 60. Showers Thursday, the chance of a thunderstorm were 70 to 75. We'll finally dry things out for Friday and Saturday. Brian, sun came up this morning, 5:33. It'll set tonight at 8:50. Summer solstice takes place on Friday at 11:54 a.m.
Thank you, Rob. Back with Dr. Gary Ostrower. Dr. Ostrower, the tension between the U.S. and Iran with the ships from Iran getting really close to the U.S. ships. What are your thoughts there?
Well, there were two ships that were attacked. One was, if I'm not mistaken, Panamanian. The other was a Japanese ship, a Japanese oil tanker. The Americans claim, the U.S. claims that these ships were fired on, or at least attacked, so to speak, by the use of Iranian mines. The Japanese crew claims that no, they don't think it was a mine. They believe that it was some kind of a missile, some kind of an object that was fired from afar. We don't really know. Did the Iranians really attack these ships? If they did, well, that's an aggressive act. If they did not, well, we better know about it. And it raises for some of the skeptics about American policy, not only in the United States but elsewhere, memories of what happened way back in 1964 when President Johnson, during the early stage of the Vietnam War, claimed that American destroyers had been attacked by North Vietnamese PT boats. It was called the Gulf. It was in the Gulf of Tonkin, and it would be called the Gulf of Tonkin incident. Well, it turns out that, one American ship was attacked, but the second, which led to the escalation of the war, the so-called second attack on a destroyer called the Maddox, never occurred. Okay, it was a kind of a fake story, and yet Johnson used that as a way to justify the escalation of American force in that area. Well, the critics of President Trump's policy are arguing that let's hold on, let's find out exactly what really happened to these two tankers, because if they really were not attacked by the Iranians, and of course the Iranians, as you well know, are denying that they had anything to do with the so-called attack, we may wind up getting into a war that we shouldn't get into a war in the first place. And I think it's worth remembering that the Iranians are not exactly naive, and they're certainly capable of involving themselves in this kind of an attack. The CIA, the Trump administration, claims that the Iranian patrol boat was next to one of these tankers trying to remove one of the mines which had not exploded. Well, what do we make out of that? But I can tell you this, that many of America's former allies, I'm talking about our NATO allies, are very, very skeptical of the American account. These are countries that do not want to get involved in, additional violence in the Middle East, and President Trump's own credibility, because he has not told the truth, because he has, if you will, lied so often, so very, very often. They are not willing to accept, these other countries, these other governments are not willing to accept the American version of events without hard proof that an attack actually occurred.
Talking to Dr. Gary Ostrower on This Day in History. You ready for that? Okay, I made one suggestion from the History Channel's website. Dr. Ostrower said, you got to do better than that. So I went to a World War II. This is kind of an interesting site. World War II dogtags.com. It's got all kinds of This Day in History events for June 18th. 1941, the British press gives detail of radar locations and the use of radar in the Battle of Britain. Free French troops occupied Damascus in Syria. Germany and Turkey sign a 10-year non-aggression pact. 1942, that was 1941. 1942, the British 8th Army evacuates, forget my pronunciations, CD